Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will be starting in a few minutes just to give people time to sign on. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We are just waiting for more people to sign on, and then we'll get started. Thank you for joining. We are just giving people some time to sign on. We'll get started in a few minutes. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sana Malik, and I am a project manager at Pro Bono Net. Welcome to today's webinar. We are excited to have all of you here with us. So before we get started, I do want to share a few quick reminders to help make the session go as smoothly as possible for everyone. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. This will help us keep track of your questions and ensure we address as many as possible during the Q&A section of the presentation. Also, feel free to use the chat function for any comments or thoughts you would like to share with the group. We'd love to see your engagement. And for anyone who needs it, captions are available. You can enable them by clicking the captions button at the bottom of your screen as well. And also a quick note that today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the recording with all the attendees after the session. So if you miss anything or want to review the content later, you will have access to that. Thank you all again for joining, and let's get started. I will kick it off to Tim, who is going to moderate the webinar today. Tim.
Thank you so much, Sanam, and welcome to the Risk Detector webinar, everyone. I am Tim Baran at Pro Bono Net, and let me just, this is the agenda that we're gonna cover, of items that we're gonna cover today. It's gonna be about 50 minutes to an hour or so. It's a fairly packed agenda, and I will have our presenters introduce themselves. Anita, do you want to kick it off?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anita Wisecup, and I'm the legal assistance developer for the State Unit on Aging with the state of Nebraska.
And I'm Ann Marcotte. I'm the Elder AccessLine attorney with Legal Aid of Nebraska.
And I am Erin Riker, the supervising attorney for technology-based legal services at the Center for Elder Law and Justice in Buffalo, New York.
And Tim Baran, I'm in charge of program development here at Pro Bono Net in New York and nationally. And that includes the risk detector. So what is the legal risk detector? It's a legal health checkup tool. It's a web-based tool that allows groups serving older adults to screen for common issues. And it refers each of these, anyone that completes the interview or the screening, to a partnering legal services organization. The screenings can take place from anywhere, from someone's home, in the library, at an organization, or any community-based settings, and of course over the phone. And it's not a mobile app, but it is a mobile-friendly web-based tool, and as such can be accessed via a link from anywhere, from the computer, from your phone, from your laptop. Really important to note that the risk detector does not provide legal advice. Only an attorney can do that. So who developed the risk detector? About 8 years ago, right here in New York, I'm based in New York City, through a partnership with Pro Bono Net, JASA, and the Law Center at Georgetown University, along with Neotologic, who is, Neotologic is the technology that we use and the platform that we use for the risk detector. And so they've been our partners from the get-go. And then a year later, we partnered with the Center for Elder Law and Justice. You'll hear from Erin later in the program. They're based in Buffalo, to improve and expand the tool's capacity and partnership model. This program, not just in New York and not just from who you'll hear during this webinar, but generally is supported by Office of Victims of Crime. Each state has a Office of Victim Services, and then there's a National Office Victims of Crime, or OVC. Then Pro Bono Net, with the support of OVC and OVS in different states, further enhance and continues to enhance the risk detector programs. Pro Bono Net and CELJ, as we affectionately call the Center for Elder Law and Justice, we continue to collaborate to develop not just a risk detector, but for resources that could be very helpful for anyone that's looking to replicate the model. Later in the program, we'll share with you some of those resources. Now, how does this tool work? There are 5 core areas that are screened with this tool, and they include the financial exploitation, abuse and neglect, consumer debt, housing, and healthcare. These are 5 of the top issues that older adults face in New York, in the United States. There are 2 versions of the risk detector. The risk detector started out as a 20-minute or so standard version that takes the community partners can select and guide older adults through the interview process. When this launched back 8 years ago, it was about 7 years ago or so, we only had the standard version. It took about 20 minutes. You could well imagine when you're out in the field and you identify a problem, you just want to, you really don't have a lot of time to do this screening. So we, together with CELJ, created a express version that takes about 5 to 10 minutes. And by far, it's the most used version of the risk detector. We were even chatting before the webinar about maybe just sunsetting the standard version because so few people use it. The interview is pretty flexible, right? So in addition to the logic model, when you enter a question, it goes to another question or it surfaces another question. There are opportunities for you to add notes so that the intake or the report generated can include those. That could be very helpful for attorneys at legal aid organizations. Trying to put this all together, starting from scratch, is where we spend a lot of time on risk detector development. This is a very extensive and sometimes complicated. You have to have all of the information in place and information gathering, requirements gathering to determine what are the questions. What if someone asks a particular question, what do you want? What's the next step in that interview that you want to surface? In addition to that, you have to figure out what are the reports that you want generated. I've seen some risk detector developers start with the reports and, hey, this is the output that I want, or this is the potential 5 outputs that a report can generate, or an interview can generate, and then work backwards from there. So this takes a lot of time. Once this is done, and this is really like tight and precise, then the developer has like sort of an easy road, because once this is done, the development process doesn't take as long. After someone completes the risk detector, a report is generated, like I just mentioned, and it is automatically emailed to a legal aid partner for follow-up. Now, that legal aid partner is part of that partnership model and collaborative model that is predetermined before you've determined if you're going to want to build a risk detector, right? So you have to put together those partners. One of those partners is a legal aid organization that's going to handle all of the requests that come from these screenings. Then the legal aid partner would call the client back, and based on that conversation, they would either engage the client for a full service representation or just provide brief counsel depending on the issue. Community partners, this is really important. You'll hear from our risk detector users in a minute, but partnerships are critical to the success of the risk detector model, right? And this includes so many different community health partners, social workers, geriatric care managers, but also legal aid organizations. We've done over the years evaluations of the risk detector, and we've engaged formal evaluators to do this. And we've done it's been pretty expansive for some of the risk detector programs. And by far, the feedback is positive, overwhelmingly positive about how the risk detector has allowed practitioners in the field to quickly screen and identify problem areas for older adults that they serve. And those older adults can quickly get the legal help that they need. The resources that I mentioned earlier, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we put together this agingsafely.us site. You'll see some older webinars on there, but also a lot of resources for advocates, but also for legal aid organizations and anyone that wants to put on such a program like the risk detector. So that's agingsafely.us. And if you want more information, if after this webinar you're like, hey, I'd like to chat more about what the risk detector is all about, please email me, Tim that's tbaran@probono.net, and I will involve others as needed. Like Erin, I know, is a really great resource on this, but depending on what you need, like maybe more programmatic help and as opposed to technical help or advice, I could involve others. All right, Erin, I'll turn it over to you. I think I need to stop sharing my screen. Yep, there we go.
Thanks, Tim. Let me go ahead and share my screen so that you guys can see what we are going to talk about with the risk detector development.
And Sanam, you could stop us at any in between our sections. If there are questions that are being popped into the widget, just let us know and we'll address them.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, everyone. Like I said, my name is Erin Riker. I am the supervising attorney for technology-based legal services at the Center for Elder Law and Justice. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about development of the risk detector and design of it at Center for Elder Law and Justice. As Tim said, we first launched it in 2018 after becoming involved in the project in 2017. There have been several iterations and updates since then. And take you guys through the development and design process of the original tool would be way more than a 10-minute conversation. So what I'm going to do as far as design and development examples is take you guys through the process of the most recent added functionality that we have gotten to our risk detector tool to make it what it needs to be for CellJ's purposes. We added functionality to assist users in understanding the legal referral process and to identify specific housing issues that we needed to address. Okay, specifically, we started with identifying issues and needs assessment. This was done first informally. There was feedback from users in Center for Elder Law and Justice generally regarding referrals. Our elder abuse unit specifically said that they were getting a lot of referrals from people who either did not have the capacity to consent to legal representation, or the partner agencies had not asked the client for permission to send it to legal services before sending the referral over. Retraining of the community partners had not really rectified this issue, so a design update was needed to the risk detector tool to make sure that this wasn't able to happen again. At the same time, we had gotten some requests from our CellJ housing unit regarding the risk detector housing questions. As you guys saw from Tim's slide, housing is one of the areas of law that the risk detector addresses. However, they wanted to add some questions specifically for tax foreclosures and deed theft risks, just to make sure that we were accurately identifying those issues. And so our next step was coordinating with our stakeholders. The coordinating with the stakeholders really happens at every level of the design process, but especially at the beginning when we were really trying to assess what we wanted to do with the tool to address these problems that we had addressed. So this involved a lot of meetings with the elder abuse unit and with the housing unit. The elder abuse unit is the unit at Center for Elder Law and Justice that had identified the issue with clients who lacked capacity. And so they were really our point people on addressing that issue. They received the most referrals that had capacity or consent issues. And we discussed several different design options with them to address this issue. The one we focused on was adding a checkbox screen into the risk detector tool. This checkbox would require the community partners that were doing the screening to certify that they believed the client had capacity to consent to legal services. Now, a lot of our community partners might not really understand what capacity is. And so we also added a hover box on that screen to explain capacity and explain a little bit about why this is required before you send a referral to a legal services agency for assistance with the risk detector. And most importantly, the tool does not allow users to progress with the referral until that box is checked. Make sure that, we're doing everything we can to make sure that the person being screened has capacity and that they want legal assistance before the referral is sent to CellJ. And on our next slide, I'm going to show you a little bit about how that looks. This screen was added. This example comes from the Express Risk Assessment, because like Tim said, that's pretty much the only one we use. And that's the only one that our end users use because they love how quick and easy it is. and just asking that the person doing the screening, which could be a social worker or a healthcare worker, someone at the Office for the Aging, anyone who comes in contact with elderly people and wants to do these screenings to make sure that they're identifying their potential legal issues, has to certify that to the best of their knowledge, the client has capacity to consent, and they have confirmed with the client that they want to be referred to CellJ for legal services. And if you hover the mouse over the what's this that you guys see on your screen on the left-hand side, right beneath the yes, if you hover over that, this box shows up, and it explains just in order to abide by our ethical rules, we need the clients to consent to legal services before we reach out to them. In New York State, the ethics rules state that we cannot solicit clients directly. We can't reach out to someone and say, hey, I think you need legal services. Can you help me? That is not exactly how we're allowed to do things. And so the client has to, confirm with the social worker or the person doing the screening that, yes, I would like to talk with CellJ about legal services before we can then reach out to them. And we also need the people to assess to the best of their ability that the client has the capacity, like the mental capacity, to decide for themselves, yes, I think I might need legal services, or yes, I want to talk a little bit more. For those who are familiar with capacity to consent to legal services is not a really high bar to clear. And people are presumed to have capacity unless it is shown that they do not. But we just wanted to make sure that we were putting it in the minds of the screeners that they were, thinking about this, does this person have the capacity to consent to legal services, or do I think that they do, before they send those referrals over? And then that helps us make sure that we are getting our services to the people who want our help and the people who are able to consent to our help. Going back to the other prong of this update, coordinating with our housing unit stakeholders, this is the unit that identified the lack of questions regarding tax foreclosure and deed theft. They also identified the funding that was used to update the tool, which was very important. We discussed the tax foreclosure and deed theft with the housing unit attorneys and paralegals. They are the subject matter experts in this area, and so we definitely wanted their input. We identified the potential warning signs for these issues, and then I worked with the housing specialist to word them in plain language for inclusion as questions in the tool, because that's very important. The people who are using the tool are not going to be legal professionals all the time, and the people who are being screened are definitely not going to be legal professionals. So, wording it in a language that a layperson can understand is very important as far as design goes. Okay, and then the next step was coordinating with our developers. That was Tim and his team at Pro Bono Net. We identified our time frame for project completion. That was determined in large part by our grant constraints. They said that we had to complete the work to be funded by a certain date, and so we basically worked backwards from that date and said, how much time do we need for development? How much time do we need to review? How much time do we need for internal testing and external testing? And then how much lead time do we want to add in at the end of that? Because these projects always take more time than we think they do, and we want to make sure that we have enough time in our schedule. And Tim's smiling because he remembers this process. So then we set the schedule for product development based on that. And we have regular meetings with Pro Bono Net to keep track of the progress and to answer any questions. The next step was testing, and testing is my favorite part. Several layers of it for both areas, the checkbox and the housing questions, testing by PBN to ensure functionality, and testing internally by CellJ to confirm that it met with our specifications. And then we sent it out to some of our partner agencies, some of our partners at the Erie County Adult Protective Services, who use our tool frequently to confirm that the product update was, useful and was addressing the issues that we had identified. And then, so I just want to take you through some lessons learned to wrap up here because I am almost out of time. The takeaways that I would give from this design process is first that identifying the issues you need takes time. Everybody thinks that problems are easy to address or easy to assess because, you see a problem, it's right in front of you. And it is and it isn't. Issues will come up with your risk detector, and you want to take the time to assess really what needs to be changed before bringing them to your developers and your coders, and really assess, whether you need to adjust the tool or whether you need to adjust the training. In our case, we tried adjusting our training first and it wasn't effective, and so we did then adjust our tool. And then involving the stakeholders at multiple points in the design process. Once our elder abuse unit and our housing unit identified the issues, that was not the last time we heard from them. It wasn't a situation where they came to us, they said we were having this problem, and we said, okay, we'll take it from here, guys. They were involved in our meetings with Pro Bono Net. They were involved at multiple points in the design process, just to make sure that we were really addressing the needs that they had brought up to us, as far as what they needed from the tool. And finally, testing, not optional, and you want to allow for as much time for this as possible. A lot of issues that we address with the tool are found in testing. You want to test at multiple points throughout the design process. You don't want to get all the way through your updates or your implementation and then find out that the second screen in your risk detector doesn't work the way you want it to. So testing happens, throughout the process and involves the stakeholders in testing. We involved our housing unit and our elder abuse unit in our testing. We also involved the adult protective services workers in testing our product because they're the ones who use it most often. And that way we made sure that this really met with what everyone needed. And I just included a link to our version of the risk detector here, and then some contact information for the Center for Elder Law and Justice. And with that wrap up, I think I am out of my time, and I wanted to stop and see what questions you guys had for me about this process.
If you have any questions, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And if you have any comments, use the chat feature.
Before we go on, I know that occasionally you may have a question about the slide decks that we're using. Happy to share this with you after. As a matter of fact, we will have a follow-up after, and we'll share a link to the recording as well as a link, as well as our slide decks.
Great.
Okay, I think next is Anita, yeah?
Well, actually, we'll let Ann go first.
Oh, Ann's gonna go first. Okay,
Yep,
awesome.
Ann's gonna go first, and she'll kind of lead you guys into her part, and then I can kind of add in my part. Hers is much more important because she is definitely hands-on.
All right. So Ann Marcotte, Legal Aid of Nebraska. So Legal Aid is the risk detector's legal aid partner here in Nebraska. So just to go over the process. So we receive the risk detector report by email. The email is monitored by 3 of our central intake unit attorneys throughout the day. And as you saw, they're marked. If they're urgent, red right away, we make sure that referral gets on our calendar to get called immediately. So we have one of our paralegals call that elder at least a couple times that day right away, within 24 hours for sure, if it's an emergency. If it's not an emergency, they're put on our regular call list and they will be called that day that we receive the referral. And then from then it's just the regular process of any legal aid applicant. The paralegal asks some contact information. We run a conflict check. Once that's finished, we progress on to the income and asset information. Should the elder be over income, so elders we consider 60 years old or over, we have funding, so we can at least give them advice or referral. In order for legal aid to accept their case, we need to have them income qualified. But exceptions for over income are veterans. We have housing funding for elders and all legal aid applicants that are getting evicted. We have funding where I can write wills and do power of attorneys for elders that are over income. Of course, if an elder is tremendously over income and they'd like us to do their will, we'd refer them to a private attorney for estate planning. We're not going to discuss trust because we just don't have the expertise, but we do have funding to help over income to at least give them some advice or referrals. So at that point, they are a client of Legal Aid of Nebraska's, by the way. Let's see. And then I know we've had questions before. So we usually get right now our referrals from the AAAs, the area agencies on aging. Do they hear back? Do we reply back? We don't email back. I wish we had time to respond to every referral, but just know once we get the referral, the elder is called at least once or twice. So the benefits, what's been the benefits that we see at Legal Aid of getting referrals from the risk detector? Well, first of all, it bypasses our access line. So the elder access line isn't open from 8 to 5 every day. It has limited hours. We're open from Monday through Thursday, 9 to noon, and then 1 to 3. And on Fridays, we're only taking calls from 9 to noon. So these referrals bypass all that. They get called immediately. They don't have to wait on hold, try to leave a voicemail. When we call, it pops up legal services so they know who they're getting the call from. And of course, they're expecting a call because they've completed the risk detector. Another positive that we've seen is that the risk detector has proven to be a good issue spotter. So instead of us just getting a call from someone that's getting evicted and they need help from eviction, we can see from the risk detector that, well, the reason they're getting evicted is they're having money problems. Their Social Security's been terminated, they've lost their job. Same with, let's just say, a collection issue. They're having elders in trouble with some credit card debt. Again, loss of job, income because Social Security's been terminated, and then we'll do another application for Social Security, and oftentimes those are cases that we can take both of them. So we've been tracking around 10 to 11 referrals a month. Of course, we'd like to increase that. We think that's underutilized, especially as a benefit to the elders, so they don't have to call and wait online and on hold on our access lines. So we've seen it as an area where we can improve, and that's where Anita's come in, because we're really trying to market and publicize it among other agencies other than the AAAs here in Nebraska.
So that was an awesome segue, Anne. Thank you so much. As I mentioned earlier, I am the legal assistance developer, and I'm fairly new to the position. I came on towards the end of May. And one of the first things that the job description was about actually that part of that creation that Erin was talking about with the legal risk detector. So by the time I came on, all of that was done. And then the plan was that it was put into our state plan for the State Unit on Aging to introduce it to the 8 AAAs across the state of Nebraska. And I know you guys are out in New York where things are a little bit more populated, but here in Nebraska, we're a pretty big state, but we don't have as many people. And that creates some issues in and of itself geographically as far as attorney to client ratio and things like that. So as I came on and I was talking with our new administrator, one of the things, as Anne mentioned, is we noticed that it's really not being utilized to the extent that we would like to see it. While we don't have a lot of people, we certainly have more than 10 elders, I'm sure, that have to have some, that need help. And we also man a telephone here at my office Monday through Friday, and we do get a lot of those same type of calls. So clearly, there's people out there who need that access. And so our AAAs work with like assisted living and nursing homes and senior centers. But we're like, okay, what about adult protective services? So I have invited one of our adult protective services workers to Pro Bono legal risk detector refresher training just like a month or two ago. And so in November, they will have an all staff meeting and we're going to again reintroduce it to them. But Ann and I have talked a lot about how we can do this. And at first we were looking at, I'm like, hey, I'm up for going door to door. Let's just knock on doors. But then, as part of my job, we do an elder justice training that has 8, 9, 10 presenters a year on various topics for seniors. And I was like, what if we, instead of going door to door, what if we introduce this as one of the presenters the at the training? We get around 600 people who attend this training. So I'm like, that's a huge amount. And it's where we get anything from hospitals to the state ombudsman to attorneys to DHHS people. So I was like, let's put a half an hour slot in there for pro bono to do a legal risk detector intro, and then let's see what we get from that. So that's where we're kind of at this point. That training is coming up very, very fast. It's on November 6th, and it's a live streaming training, so people can either come in person, they can go to host sites across the state, or they can have it literally directly live streamed to their computers at home through one of our local television stations. So it's even better, I think, than Zoom or WebEx or anything like that. So that's kind of where we're at in our processes. And I will leave the floor open for any questions for us that I can hopefully answer.
That was awesome. I don't see any questions, but I do have. Do you hate when someone says I have a 3-part question? Because you should just ask one question at a time. But since this is for Anita, Erin, and Anne, so I figured it could be a 3-parter. And the first is, what would you say are, or maybe is, the critical aspect to the success of a program like the risk detector? Like, what do you need in order for the risk detector to be successful? And conversely, what are the top challenges that you faced in implementing a program like this? And then finally, are there any specific stories that of success that you want to share? So I'm going to open it up.
I will go ahead and as part of my position, I do go to the 8 area agencies across the state and we do monitoring. So we've been to I think 3 so far this year. And that's my question is I ask them, are you using the legal risk detector? Who is using the legal risk detector? And why, if you're not, why? What is going on? So some of the questions that we've had are the fact that the training or that the legal risk detector can have some repetitive questions. And also, when you get more out toward the western part of the state where it's a lot more rural, there's some distrust about attorneys and stuff. So I would say that some of the things that we need to focus on is how we can overcome some of those challenges. And also, um, I think through that comes those partnerships with those people who the community can trust.
Just to kind of build on what Anita was saying, I think the success and the challenges of the risk detector tool does turn on your community partners. We partnered primarily with the Adult Protective Services of Erie County for our risk detector, and that is still who we get the most referrals from. And, I mean, that's why our tool works as well as it does, because we have a solid working relationship with them. We go back and we retrain them fairly regularly to train the new people and also give refreshers to our, existing APS caseworkers. we involve them when we update the tool in making sure that the functionality is, the way that they need it to be in order to screen effectively. And, we have other community partners and, we've had some mixed results with, partners that really want to be trained on the tool, but then it kind of like falls away from being used. They're really just, it's just one more thing that they have to do and they're not really prioritizing it. So to answer your question, Tim, that's, all three parts of it right there is the strength of your community partnership. So identifying those partners that want to use the tool and that it makes the most sense for them to use the tool is really vital in terms of making sure the launch of this tool is successful for your agency.
Well, and just from our end, it couldn't be easier for us to receive these referrals. It's a simple email, and we have capacity to take on more. When Anita and I first started talking about this, it's like, well, how big can you go? When are we going to have to cut it off? We're nowhere near that yet. So, and then just locally, since we have a really good, strong relationship with ENWA here in Omaha. So that's where we get the bulk of our referrals. But then Omaha and Douglas County, Sarpy County are the most populated counties in Nebraska. So that's why that is. But and Anita did touch on it. There are some AAAs that are a little hesitant and we're working on it. So.
Yeah, I just want to second that. It's what we hear a lot, that the critical to the success of a risk detector program is the strength of your partners. And one of the ways to do that is trainings. And I know, Anita, you were talking about trainings. And so just multiple touches, because there's turnover in that field also, like in every other. And depending on who's coming in and who is familiar with the program or who wants, you need someone who's going to be an advocate for the program in your partner organizations and who's going to really drive that adoption. So that multiple touch is really important. We've seen that relationship with partners fall off when there's been a transition in leadership or turnover in staff. So emphasize partner and relationships with partners. All right. Well, thank you very much, team. Every webinar or every conversation for me is a learning experience, and I have learned on here. I'm really grateful for you taking the time to be on this webinar. Sanam, thank you so much for organizing this webinar. We are going to follow up with an email and with links and a reminder that resources are at agingsafely.us. And if you have any questions, I'm at tbaran@probono.net. All right, thank you. Any final words, Sanam, or is that good to go? Are we good to go?
No, we're good to go. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.